PowerPoint? No?
I'm going to post it right now.
Can we go get that real quick?
Yeah, let me, gang, I'm sorry that I swore I posted the PowerPoint this morning and it's not up there. I'm going to retrieve it to do a lecture from it and I don't see it. My bad. I don't know. You know what? I think I posted it on the wrong class. Okay. Hey, what's up, Ponca? I see everybody. How's it going?
Good.
Now, are you guys in the classroom where? Because there's one class over there in Ponca that you can only see like either a picture of me or the PowerPoint. Do you have two screens in that class?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I had one class that I taught over there, and they said the whole semester all they could see was my PowerPoint. They couldn't see anything what I was saying, and I was like, oh man, that's got to be pretty bad.
That lag.
Yeah, if you want to go print it off, I just now put it up there. It's a lot of pages, so if I do like 3 or 6 per page, it's probably better. Okay, and another thing, I taught statistics in here. Oh no, okay, we're just dialing in. So I taught statistics in here yesterday, and the whole time the hackers were trying to dial in, and so I lose my PowerPoint like literally every 2 minutes. So if that's the case today, you're going to see me bald by the end of class because I'm going to rip literally every hair off of the top of my head. So it was very, very frustrating. And I don't know. I don't know that I have an option if that. It looks like it's going to happen today. So I may have one option. In fact, hold tight, all sites, hold tight, because I'm going to see if I can come up with an option for us. Just in case this is the hacker's going to continue to come in. So hold tight. Give me probably a minute and a half, and I'll be right back.
Exactly.
So I'm going to have an impromptu whiteboard, just in case, because I can't use like the whiteboard markers on the smartboard, or they might.
True.
They're probably going to escort me out of here like a white jacket with my arms tied together. Like, what are you doing? That's not good. So let's see if I can do this as a backup. I've never done this before. Yeah, I don't see any dry erase markers. Okay, so if it happens one more time, I'm going to assume that the hackers are going to try to ruin my class, ruin our time together. So if it happens again, you're going to see me run away, and I'm going to do class from my impromptu whiteboard. But I'm going to have to run and get dry erase markers. So bear with me. I know we're going back old school. So let's see. So we'll go ahead and get started. What I want to talk about today is something that should help us understand our people better. So regardless of whether you're in criminal justice, of whether you're in education, whether you're in psychology, what I'm about to present will give you a good understanding. You guys have the dopamine understanding of addiction. And so now we're going to talk about one of the primary, if not the leading cause of people becoming addicted. So it's a topic that I'm passionate about and that I spent a lot of time studying. I was in the field for about 8 years before I learned about this information, and it's like everything like aligned, and it's like a light came on. It's like this explains it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the role of trauma and understanding. And really, this kind of goes back to my time as an undergraduate. One of my papers as an undergraduate was on PTSD and how many different disorders were co-occurring with post-traumatic stress disorder, like depression, anxiety disorders. It was comorbid with so many different disorders, and so really it's kind of been underlying kind of my thought process for many years. And so when people come into your office, whether they're going to come into a probation office or come into let's say a kid's going to the vice principal's office because they're in trouble. Let's say that somebody is coming to a counselor or a therapist for treatment. What's the first question we ask them? Or the first question in our mind?
Why are you here?
Why are you here?
Why are you here?
Why are you here? And what's typically the reason why they're there?
I don't know. That's the response I get.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
It's either that or I got told I'm supposed to be here.
Yeah.
I got told I'm supposed to be here. So
That's true.
if we're a counselor, what's one of the first things that we look to? Because we're taught that if somebody's coming to our office, there's a what?
Problem.
There's a problem. What's your problem? What's wrong with you? That's one of the first things that we're taught. And even as a probation officer, you probably have OSCN, in front of you. What's wrong with this person? Why are they here? What did they do? We're taught we better have a diagnosis within the first couple of sessions if we want to get payment if we're doing therapy. What's wrong with you? So there's an issue with that. That's our mindset. What's wrong? What's wrong with you? And so today what we're going to talk about is whether we should shift that mindset away from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. So if we're gonna work with somebody, if we're gonna do therapy, if we're gonna educate them, if we're going to talk to them, a lot of times we'll go back and get a history. We'll go back and get a history of what's happened to them. Where were you born? Who raised you, or where'd you grow up at? We're kind of looking for the biopsychosocial history. It's one of the things in substance abuse. If you take another class, we talk about assessment methods, and so going through and doing a thorough history is one of the things that we do, is trying to understand where did this addiction come from. But we want to talk about today is what happened that people have substance use disorders. And the research has come together across many different disciplines, across many different fields, not just psychology, but the medical field, neuroimaging, sociology. You take a number of different sciences coming together, dovetailing, creating a lot of evidence here. And it really came from a study that began in the late 1980s. There was a group that took care of health care in California. So it'd be like Blue Cross of Oklahoma, or a company like that. And the company's name was Kaiser Permanente, and basically they covered health care for millions of individuals in California. And so they wanted to look at some things because there was a weight loss program going on in this to helping people lose significant amounts of weight. There's actually, did you know that you can take someone to go on a diet? You can actually go without eating any food for a whole year, as long as you get your essential vitamins and nutrients in liquid. You can go without it. You can fast for literally a year and be pretty healthy with that. Of course, probably not very comfortable. And so they had, it sounds awful, but this is one of the things that they did in the weight loss program at the Kaiser Permanente Foundation. They were taking people through this. And what they were finding is that people were doing pretty good. People were losing weight. But then they found that many people, a large percentage of them, were dropping out after they having this success. And it's like the hard work to them, the researchers like, it's already, you've already taken off all this weight. The hard part's done. Why are you then leaving, the weight program? And this is before lap bands. This is before laparoscopic surgery, these things. So they really were trying to figure out what's going on. So there were two researchers. One's name is Dr. Anda, the other one's Dr. Fleety. And so they started to kind of wrestle with, what's happening here, why people are dropping out. And so they started interviewing them. And so what they found was, as they talked to more and more people, there was a higher rate of sexual abuse. And in the late 80s, this kind of thing wasn't discussed. It wasn't really talked about. The DSM-3, which was put out in the 70s, with the DSM-5 now, but the DSM-3 said the rate of incest is 1 in a million. And so this is kind of blowing them out of the water. And so they both researchers were like, okay, there's something bigger going on here. So we need to look at our data. We need to look at our people. And so what they did is they sent out I think it's around 120 questions. But they sent out a big survey. And so if you send out a survey, typically a good survey response is maybe 10%. But the way they did the survey is it was tied to everybody's health insurance. And so they sent it out to 25,000 individuals and got around 18,000 of them back. So that's a really good response. It's about a 75% return rate on it was tied to their health insurance. So that, they had some incentive to do the survey. So in the midst of those 120 questions, they tried to kind of think about, okay, which questions, we're look for patterns here. They interspersed 10 particular questions. And they tried to pick them all somewhat empirically. They didn't put these right in a row. They were kind of jumbled up in this big survey. And they started to find something striking with these particular 10 questions. These particular 10 questions have to do, and ACE, I will spell it out. ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And so, I remember listening to, I've heard one of the researchers talk, and he said, he was trying to do the link between the sexual abuse and the weight. So he said, well, how much did you weigh, when the sexual abuse, started? And so some people would say, well, I think I was about 60 pounds. You mean you're about 60 pounds less? No, I think I was about 60 pounds, meaning, it happened in childhood. So that's where they started thinking, well, maybe it has to do with childhood things, So they started looking at this, and their study is called the ACE study. Now, if you look this up, you can actually come up with, if you do an EBSCO search, let me see if I can pull it up pretty quickly. I did this a couple of years ago because I had a student challenge me on, this is just going to go away. This is just made up. You're not talking about real stuff here. This is just I had a student really take kind of offense to what I was presenting, and so I pulled it up. And so if you do an adverse childhood experiences, oh man, don't do it. Oh. Okay, so basically my screenshot, what I was trying to show you there, if you put an EBSCO search, if you put that in the search engine, there have been 109,000 articles published on the ACE study since the late 80s. This has picked up traction especially in the last 10 or 15 years. This is, like I said, several sciences are coming together, paying attention to this. Let me see if I can get the computer coming back. Come on, work. One more time. Okay. So these are the actual questions. So again, these were on the survey, and so number one, this is small print, so I'll read it. Did a parent or other household member of the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you feel like you might be physically hurt? What is that describing?
Physical.
That is
Verbal.
that is describing emotional abuse. Yes, verbal abuse. That's actually reportable in the state of Oklahoma. There's a caption, a law that says if you know somebody's being emotionally abused, it's your duty to report it.
Okay.
The second one, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often punch, slap, grab you, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? Now, what's that describing? Yes, physical abuse. Number three, did an adult or person 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you or have sex with you? But that's obviously describing sexual abuse. Did you ever feel like, number four, that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or no one in your family looked out for each other, didn't feel close to each other, or support each other? What would that be?
Neglect.
Yes, absolutely. That's neglect. Emotional neglect. So those are the first four. Number five, did you often or very often feel like you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, had no one to protect you, or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if needed? What's that? Another form of neglect. This is more physical neglect, not emotional, but physical. You know, you think about the dirty house. You know, somebody's basic needs are not being met. Number six. This affects over 50% of people in Oklahoma. Were your parents ever divorced or separated? Separation from a parent. Number seven. Was your mother or stepmother ever pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Ever kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard, or threatened with a gun or knife? What's that?
Domestic violence.
Domestic violence. Domestic violence. Number eight. Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker, alcoholic, or used street drugs? Now this is
Drug addict.
right up our alley in this class. You know, we're talking about somebody that's got a substance abuse problem. Number nine. Was a household member depressed, mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? So there we're dealing with a parent with a mental illness. Did a household member ever go to prison? Separation from a parent. Yes. So what they did is they took the participants and they added up the number of. It's kicked me off one time, but the hacker did. So it's better than it was yesterday.
You shouldn't be getting any of those calls.
It's better than it was yesterday. So added up for each one of those categories they fill in, they added up at 1 point. Now, if you find yourself on this category, I'm going to give you a qualifying statement right now. People that go into helping professions tend to show up a little higher on this scale on adverse childhood experiences. I'm on here at least twice. So I want you to know we're going to go over some pretty sobering, depressing data. And I don't want you to feel like because of where you are, you're on a college campus, you are attaining a degree, you have in your own lives come up with your own ways of coping if you have experienced some of these things and coping successfully. So that's one of the things we're going to end with is how do people overcome these things and get better. But we're going to go through some pretty sobering statistics in just a minute. So anyway, they added these things up and they came up with somebody's ACE score, the number of times that you could fall into 4 out of 10 or 6 out of 10. I met one person, a kid in DHS custody that actually he said, "What if you're in all 10?"
So it was just 10 questions long?
No, the survey was 120, but the questions that they sampled, they chose these 10 because they had to do with adverse childhood experiences. Good question. Good question. So what does this mean? What did have all those questions, what do those events that those things are asking about, what do those have in common?
traumatic events that happen in
They
childhood.
are traumatic events affecting what?
Relationship.
Absolutely. The relationship with who?
Somebody and their spouse,
Family.
their family.
Parent.
Family. The parent. In each one of those, in each event, a primary relationship somehow was broken. And so you think about this in formative years for kids. You know, when we've learned about the brain and it's developing quickly. Think about what's happening in the brain during these formative years, and how does this affect future relationships? If you've seen broken relationships, what does that set the stage for? And more interesting and more pertinent to our study at hand, how does this affect future health? That's where the researchers really focused their energy. There were the doctors that did this, they were medical doctors. They didn't have anything to do with psychology. Again, they were interested in weight. They did not set out to do this. So then looking at across the lifespan, what happens here when the person's infant, a child, an adolescent? Well, how does that then affect their relationships and their well-being as an adult? So this is the ACE study. This is starting, like I said, it's starting to gain traction. Actually, it has gotten a lot of traction. It has helped shape the Pinnacle Plan, which was where Oklahoma Child Welfare got sued because 9 children died while they were in state custody. So while our state had custody of children, 9 of them died. So we weren't taking very good care of kids, so another state sued us, another out-of-state entity. And so we came up with this Pinnacle Plan and looked at the ACE study to figure out, how do we help these kids better? How are we better able to care for them? One thing I want you to know, it's been good now.
Yeah, it's good. It should be good from now on. But if you get any more, call me.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Thank you. They studied 18,000 adults. I want to caution you that none of them received supportive treatment. So when you're hearing these numbers, folks didn't get treatment. It was a weight loss study. What they found was that the more categories that somebody fell into, the higher their BMI. Now, it's not a completely predictive model. It's not a one-to-one relationship. It's not saying, absolutely, if you have a bunch of these, all these bad things are going to happen. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that it does significantly increase risk. And what they found was that the more traumas that someone has, the more their body mass index. And what they also found was that these things accurately, reliably predict a lot of disease conditions. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a few slides and talk about what it's predicting. And I'll show you the researcher and let him speak for his own research, since we've got good audio.
What you will see is the result
This is a little bit
of what happens to people
blurry, but
who have abusive experiences in childhood or
Bear
grow
with
up in dysfunctional households and never have access to any sort of treatment. This is the largest study of its type that's ever been done to examine the health and social effects of adverse childhood experiences over the course of a lifetime. Essentially, we're asking, how do you get from here to here, from a newborn infant with total potential to the man who is broken biomedically, psychologically, and socially, who's got the cardboard sign on his neck at the corner. We looked at several categories of childhood abuse and neglect, and several categories of household dysfunction. And we picked these really empirically because as we spoke with people in more and more depth in the weight program, the categories that we studied kept turning up more and more frequently. The study is simple in concept. It has a retrospective and a prospective component. We are meeting people here and asking them about what happened here on average a half century earlier. The average age participant is 57 years old. The population was 80% white, 10% black, 10% Asian, 50.5% female, 49.5% male. 74% had been to college, 46% had graduated from college. In no way could you dismiss this as a marginalized population. I'll give you a summary of what we found and then spend the rest of the time providing you evidence for why this is true. What we found is that the things that we termed adverse childhood experiences, and that I will define momentarily, are remarkably common. What is uncommon is their recognition or their acknowledgement. They are well concealed by time, by shame, by secrecy, and by social taboo. They turn out to be strong predictors of what happens later in life in terms of health risks, in terms of disease, and as you will see, in terms of premature mortality. And that combination of their high prevalence and their great power makes this statement not an overblown one, makes adverse childhood experiences the leading determinant of what happens to the health and social well-being of a nation's population. Okay, we looked at...
So he's going to kind of go through some numbers, and they're pretty blurry. And I'm going to take you through the numbers that... Now, he's talking to a big audience. It's part of a larger... It's part of a larger 1 hour and 30 minute. I'm not going to expose you to... If you want to look up the address to YouTube on the PowerPoint, you're welcome to. But it actually goes on... That talk goes on for about an hour and a half. And so there's a lot of data that they've accumulated. Again, they had a very big sample. If you're looking to get a drug passed through the ADA, or excuse me, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, what type of, you guys have read the fine print on some of the medications. What type of sample size do they usually use if they're looking to like get a drug passed through the FDA? Like how many participants in their study?
I feel like they use the selective of only the ones that works for.
You feel like they use the selective one? I'll tell you that it's a lot less than 18,000.
Yeah.
Usually, if you look on the fine print, if you have a study with like 2,000 people, that's enough to get a drug passed through the FDA. We're looking at 18,000 people. If we're looking at how much weight something carries, I don't know of another study that has more weight because typically your sample size are so much smaller. So if you're looking at 18,000 people, this is pretty significant. One of the things that they've taken criticism for is, and you heard him talk to a little bit about it, is that their population didn't necessarily represent the whole United States. 74% had been to college. 46, 47% had graduated college. That's quite a bit more than the average population. Most people haven't graduated college in the general population. His point back to that being that these are privileged folks that had this health insurance and participated in this. Do you expect to have any better findings in the general population and folks that haven't had this many privileges? So one of the things that he found, overall rate of sexual abuse in the study was 22%. 28% for females and about 18% for males. So 1 in 4, 1 in 6. So if you think back in your own lives to your own experiences growing up in a classroom full of 20 or 25 people, kids that are sitting around you, and thinking, wow, there might be 6 or 7 folks that are in the same class that have been through some very traumatic things. What he found is that a majority of the folks in the study had been through at least one trauma, and most of them had been through, and a lot of them had been through more than one. And so we actually kind of simulated this at Youth and Family with some of the kids that we were seeing, and saw some pretty striking things. Let me pull back up my PowerPoint from here. So what they did then is they started categorizing, because they were able to track these people's health and able to then verify what they were seeing, with their medical records, along with the survey. And so they looked back and they saw, well, current smoking. And so if people had 4 to 5 of these adverse childhood experiences, there were about 12% of those people were smokers, and they saw that incrementally, with 6 or more, about almost 20% of those 1 in 6 people are smoking. 1 in 5 people are smoking. And so they said, what else? What else do we see here? And so they saw cardiopulmonary disease, obstructive pulmonary disease. With 4 or more, you saw about 18% with cardiopulmonary obstruction. Then they started looking at other things. They started looking at alcoholism. And the rate of alcoholism in the general population is a little under 10%. And if you have 4 or more of these, the rates of alcoholism were at about 16%. So again, they're seeing this stair step, which what do we know about correlation? I mean, we're looking at correlational research right here. And so there's a strong correlation with the number of ACEs that are happening. So they're like, well, maybe not. But the thing is, you can take this across literally every physical condition, be it diabetes, be it heart disease, be it cancer, and you see the same relationship. The more adverse childhood experiences a person has been through, the higher their risk for developing these health problems. And so this is actually increased risk. So they've started doing the statistics where they're trying to look at, okay, what's the increased risk of this happening now? So if you're looking at IV drug use and comparing that to somebody that's had 0 adverse childhood experiences to somebody who's been in a category with 4 or more, they have an 1,100% increased risk of being an IV drug user. So if you're treating somebody for IV drug use, what's one thing that you should probably look for in their background?
Trauma.
You better look for trauma. Same thing goes with alcoholism. 600% more likely to be an alcoholic with 4 or more. Smoking, it goes up over 200%, over double. An ACE score in hallucinations. You see that the prevalence of hallucinations and being out of touch with 7 or more, there's a 10% of those folks are experiencing hallucinations. One of the things we know about trauma is that people tend to dissociate from their trauma, tend to drop out of reality as a way of coping.
I like how they incorporated whether or not they abuse alcohol and drugs, because I feel like that's important, especially for somebody who's hallucinating and they haven't been using substances. I mean, you really need to dig into why that's happening. So I like that they did that.
Thank you. Oh, shoot, my student camera is not good. Hold on, let me see if I can. It's, wow. Hey, that's not bad. Sorry, Enid was all over. That's what my camera in Alpha usually looks like right there. Okay, we're better. Sorry. Sorry, off-site campuses. Okay, then you look at rates of depression. Rates of depression for women that have been through 4 or more, 58% of women are experiencing some sort of depression in this study. 35% of men. Why the big discrepancy there? Why such a big?
Well, some men won't admit that they're going through depression. They won't report it.
Okay,
They're not honest about it.
Maybe reporting. I will tell you, you're on. I think you're on the right track there. I think sadness is a much more socially acceptable emotion for women than it is for men. And so, in a few slides, I think we're going to find out where these men are that don't feel depression or don't admit to it or whatever the situation is here.
I think postpartum may play. I mean, it may be a very small portion of it, but I think it's something that's understated.
I think it might be understated, but I think also, again, I think sadness is a socially more acceptable emotion. What's more emotionally acceptable for men in our society?
Anger.
You get mad. So I think we're going to see that in a couple of slides here. The increased incidence of suicide attempt. Almost a 1,400% increase in rates of occurrence with suicide attempts. So if somebody's suicidal, what should you be thinking about in their childhood? Antidepressant medications. 100% of the people in their study that had 5 or more were on antidepressant medications at some point in their life. ACE scored impaired childhood memories, the memory of childhood. With 4 or more, that's at a rate of about 35%. Well, another of the diagnostic criteria, another thing that you look for in people that have been through trauma, one of the hallmarks, one of the diagnostic criteria is an inability to recall certain points of the trauma. In other words, your body protects yourself by not remembering it, by becoming amnesic, by just not remembering aspects of the trauma. And it's like a defense mechanism, and that's one of the hallmarks and one of the markers that you look for in somebody with PTSD. It's hyper-arousal, reliving, re-experiencing, and then this inability to recall, impaired memory. And so you see 35%. You see the correlation between sexual abuse and number of unexplained symptoms. And going to the hospital and just saying, oh, my stomach hurts, I've got a headache, or I just don't feel good. Again, that is a stair step. Well, what other kind of studies were like this? What this reminds me of is that, early on the cigarette companies were fighting. Well, this is all correlation, relation. Cigarettes don't cause cancer. They don't cause. And so, because what they were seeing is, early on, is you see like a study that says, okay, well, if you smoke half a pack, well, you have this much chance. And if you smoke a pack, then you have this much chance. Then if you smoke a pack and a half, you have this much chance. And if you smoke 2 packs, you have this much chance of lung cancer. And so the relationship is there. And so this is the smoke. We're gonna talk about the bullet, because science has found the bullet behind this, and we're going to discuss what that is in just a minute. What we're seeing is the smoke. ACE score and indicators of important. So you're talking about, well, how does this affect the workforce? How does this affect people in their lives and their productivity? And so if you look at absenteeism, if you're gone from work over 2 days a month, look at the same rate. The same stair step is there. 15% of people that had 4 or more were gone over 2 days a month to their job. Look at the people with serious financial problems. You had over 20% of them, almost 25%. You want an explanation for poverty? You want to look at somebody that's having trouble making ends meet? Look to their childhood. What happened to them? What 5-year-old is responsible for their own safety when they're 5? What 10-year-old is responsible for their own well-being when they're 10? I'm not trying to put off accountability, but I want us to understand as professionals when we go out in the field what's happened. I want us to be open-minded with it and not automatically blaming, but trying to fix it. Blaming people, blaming things doesn't do anything. It doesn't help anyone. Looking for an answer, trying to find an answer, trying to work with somebody through what their problems are. What happened to you? Not what's wrong with you. What happened to you? Serious job problems with 4 or more, almost 20%. Had something lives. People that have over 50 sexual partners, which is predictive of health problems that accompany that type of promiscuity, 600% more likely. IP violence, domestic violence, 500% more likely of being a domestic violent relationship. 3 or more marriages, again, failed relationships. What was illustrated? What did they grow up witnessing? What became ingrained in the neural networks? Almost 400% increase in 3 or more marriages. And here's where we find the men that weren't depressed. ACE score and the risk of being a victim of domestic violence. So the men, there's a little increased risk. But the women have been victimized by the non-depressed, angry men. Incidence of rape, the likelihood of being raped goes up 900%. So what we see through the studies, and again, like I said, you can look at heart disease, because it does lead to cognitive impairment. You can see that the hippocampus, which is responsible for our memories, is smaller. You can see that there's an area in the prefrontal cortex that's responsible for decision making. That's smaller. You can see that the amygdala, which is responsible for our impulse control, which is if somebody starts to give us the dirty eye or look at us wrong, it's what keeps us from getting, what are you looking at, man? You want some of this? It keeps us into that impulse control where we're not reacting that way, where we're able to take a breath and think about it for a minute before reacting that way. So if you have people that are on your docket, that are on your caseload, that are constantly getting into fights or have protective orders, or and we did the same type of thing with children that were at Youth and Family Services basically referred to services through the schools. What we found is 90% of them had at least one ACE. 35% of them had a parent that had gone to prison. 38% of them had a parent with a substance use problem. 40% of them had a parent that was in a domestically violent relationship, had witnessed domestic violence. About 90% of them had witnessed a separation from a parent, either through divorce or being raised by an alternative caregiver. There are reasons why people come to counseling. There are reasons why people get in trouble with the law. There are reasons for these things. So you have an adoption of health risk behavior, which leads to disease, disability, and social problems. And on average, people with 6 of these, that if you're in 6 categories, people live about 20 years shorter. The lifespan decreases by 20 years. And if you have one ACE, if you're in one category, you have a 50% greater likelihood of having more than one ACE.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker of this morning, Rob Anda. Rob?
Household members, 13%.
This is another
6% had someone sent to prison.
of the authors.
11% psychological abuse, 28% physical, 1 in 5 had been sexually abused, and 15% had been emotionally, and 10% physically neglected. That is not getting what they need to stimulate the new number. Next, what we saw is that adverse childhood experience. So ACEs are common. Number one, ACEs are common. I'll guarantee you we now know that ACEs are common everywhere, in every population, in every audience where I've done ACE surveys, they're common. And I'm not going to do a survey here, we don't have time, but ACEs, if we did an ACE survey in this room, I would give you my house if the ACE scores in this room are not higher than what we found with Kaiser Health Plan, because everywhere I've gone, it's higher. I'm going to move ahead here. So let's look at domestic violence and the risk of other ACEs. This is what we saw in the data that we had to learn to deal with. The height of these bars is the percentage of people who were emotionally abused in this set here. So this is the percentage. Here's 20%, 40, 60, 80%. The color code is the frequency with which people witness domestic violence, almost 17,000 people. So those that never did, it was about 5%. Here's once or twice seeing that, sometimes, often, or very often witnessing domestic violence. And you see this goes up to almost 80%. This is 8%. This bar is 10 times higher than that bar. So there is a 10-fold.
Dr. Randolph?
Oh no. So I haven't. So you guys haven't heard me for the past 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
No.
Were you muted?
Yes, I was muted. I'm sorry. That's my fault. So the 4 people in Enid got all that great information.
It was good. It was good too.
Very good.
Down.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. Basically, what I said is that domestic violence. These are rates of not ACEs. These are rates of domestic violence now, and how highly domestic violence is correlated with emotional abuse, with physical abuse, and also sexual abuse. I think one of the faults that I had, at least in my own upbringing, was thinking about kids under the age of 5. What's one thing? Derek? How old were you when you had your first memory? How old were you? Do you think? Like, first thing you can remember.
I don't know. My first memory.
Yeah, you don't have to tell what. Just estimate like how old you think you were.
I'm just first memory. I'm say right around probably. Now you got me thinking. I know one memory I do remember is probably when I was 16, probably. So I'm gonna say give or take that time.
So like 16.
Yeah, give or take.
Okay. Cassie, Ashley, how about you? How old were you when about the time you had your first memory?
Ashley's not present today, but I'm here.
Oh, hi, Cassie.
I would say mine occurred probably really early. I would say probably 3, 4, 5. It's much earlier.
Do you have a lot of memories when you were like 3 or 4 or 5?
I'm not coming up with anything so far.
Okay. I have one like probably 3. I stepped on a floor furnace, the old gas floor furnaces, and waffled my foot, and so
Good painful ones.
yeah. But typically we don't have many memories before we're 5, and so coming into the field, I, like a lot of us, just assumed those memories, the stuff that happens before 5 really doesn't matter. It doesn't amount to a hill of beans. And this, and through my experiences, I could never be more than 180 degrees wrong on anything. If anything, the earlier that you are, the more impressionable, the more lasting then the pathways become in the brain. And I think the research bears that out. So that's one of the things I want to talk about is the changes in the brain.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Okay, so what struck people about that particular video? Anything stand out?
That all kind of develops together. I mean, you need each part of it to make the other parts stronger.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're building like the frame of a house, the framework of a house. Everything else that you're going to do the rest of your life is being built at this early time.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage in serve and return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
Okay, anything in particular stand out there?
If they weren't getting that interaction at a young age, then they would be affected later in life.
Yeah. Intuitively, yeah. Good answer, absolutely. And that kind of alludes to the next one, which has to do with if you have some bad experiences. So let's look at that. If I can find it in my PowerPoint.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious, lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
Okay, what stood out in that video?
That if the children are experiencing constant stress from abuse or neglect, it causes their neurons to actually not fire at a time when they're supposed to be firing and learning and making new connections, instead of getting all of that knowledge and all of that enhancement. They don't get anything.
Now, there are critical periods in children's development. I mean, there's a researcher that took, I think did we have the cats with the closed eyes in here? Do we have that illustration? So, at what if you see baby kittens, what's the deal with baby cats or baby dogs? Can they see when they're first born?
Oh no.
No, their eyes are closed. So there was a researcher in the 50s that postulated that if you don't let baby kittens get any light to their eyes between like 7 and 9 days of development, that there was a critical period where if they didn't get light, that they'd always be blind. So took a control group of kittens and let them just grow naturally, and took the other kittens and either, I don't know how they kept the eyes, or they sewed their eyes shut or what they did, but they made sure that they couldn't see. They blinded them from lights from 7 to 9 days. And every kitten that they did with never, ever, ever developed the ability to see. In other words, there was a critical time when the light had to hit the cat's eyes for its brain to grow. And humans go through a lot of the same things. And so it talked a lot about bonding, a lot about learning in this video. It brings to mind, I serve on the child abuse response team here in Garfield County. And a few years ago, we had a case that we staffed where a parent had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old and decided that they wanted to go party in Stillwater. And so what they did is they bungee corded them in their room and left them overnight, and went to Stillwater and passed out and got thrown in jail. And so they came to the next day, and child welfare, eventually the police got called, went to the house, and they found a 3-year-old. There was basically poop smeared all over the walls. The 1-year-old had dirtied their diaper, and the 3-year-old had tried to then change and take care of the 1-year-old. Hungry, didn't have food, obviously very scared. Could you, as a therapist or clinician, go back and talk to them about that experience when they're older?
If you know, you could try.
Probably not, because most of us don't have memories that early. That's the thing that I'm telling you, is that the earlier the trauma, the harder it is to try to work through. Because there are deeply seated things that happen before we're even 5 that we can't get to then. We can't get to later. We're just always experiencing, if you always are around somebody getting beat up or yelled at or threatened or hit, or you don't have enough food, what do you expect from the world? What is your brain telling you that the world is going to be like when you're older? What you saw, what you experienced, you're going to be hungry. The world sucks. The world's a bad place. Don't trust other people. It's not something I can go into therapy and say, oh, well, let's work through your mistrust of other people. No, it's just a paranoid feeling. It's those people, the other people are out to get me. Or I can't trust anybody. The failed relationships, the 3 or more marriages, all the domestic violence, this comes on early. Yes, Nikki.
I have a question. Okay. Is there a certain, have there been studies done on what young children consider trauma? Like, maybe dad's just raging at mom. Is there a certain age where that's trauma, or is there a certain age where that's just normal?
I think that you see a lot of people normalize it. I mean, I think you see all kids try to normalize it and try to cope. I mean, part of that is if you work with kids that are out of custody of their parents, that are in state custody, about every one of them have this fantasy. I've met very few. I can count them on one hand out of the hundreds of kids I've worked with over the years that don't want to go back with their parents, regardless of the dysfunction of their parents, because it was normal. It was what they knew.
Or what if they say, well, I mean, I had a decent childhood, nothing ever happened, Other people have all these traumas, nothing ever happened to me, because they consider that nothing.
It's normalized. I would say it is normalized. But the traumas create pathways that are hard to change. And basically, the bullet in the video that I showed you where the connections are actually deconnecting, the pruning. The same thing happens with too much meth, the neural pruning. We can go in and see the damage in people's brains that have been through trauma. And so this is what happens
Anyway,
to a
we
person's
talk about
brain
child maltreatment and brain
when they go through trauma.
consequences, and then the clinical relevance of this. We can talk about also brain actually change. Does something happen in the brain that leaves a scar as a result of this? And in fact, the current literature talks about the anatomy of the brain. And if we look at the brain as something that's rich and promising and wonderful at birth, and then we expose that brain to all these sorts of things, this is what happens. The brain changes. Cool. Anyway, so again, somebody who's incarcerated in the home, mental illness, substance abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mother abuse, separation, divorce, emotional abuse, and so on. When a child is exposed to this type of environment, the brain actually does change anatomically, chemically. The area.
So here's the areas affected.
Maintain memories, emotions.
And this is for you guys out there to remember. So our hippocampus, that's the part of the brain that's responsible for what, Alva? What's our hippocampus responsible for? I talked about it earlier.
Memories, emotions?
Yes, absolutely. It's responsible for our memories. It's actually one of the more plastic areas of our brain that we can develop new memories. In somebody that has been through significant trauma, this is smaller. So what does that do for school? Making memories in school. If you can think about, you don't know what you're going to eat at night, are you going to be able to do algebra or math or concentrate on reading? Your corpus callosum, that's the center of your brain. It goes between the two hemispheres. Your two hemispheres communicate with the corpus callosum. This is smaller. That's the ability to integrate information from our logical side and our more feeling and intuitive side. We aren't able to integrate information as well. Our cerebellar vermis. I worked with a young kid in Meadow Lake Hospital. Tall African American kid. Just a big, physical presence, and I was like, this guy just needs to get into basketball. So I had it in my mind, I'm going to teach this guy basketball, and he's going to be, if he can do that, just find something positive, get into something positive. And so I'd work with him, and he'd dribble it off his foot, and couldn't shoot, and I was like, man, you got to practice, just, I was really on him. And the thing is that in somebody that's been through trauma, your cerebellum, your cerebellar vermis, helps you coordinate your motion, helps you coordinate things. That's smaller in people. People that have been through trauma, just get out there, you need to work harder, you're being lazy. No, not necessarily. Somebody may not be able to do it because of what they've been through. Their brain literally is smaller. The amygdala, that's what I was talking about, regulates emotions, regulates our impulse control. That's smaller. These are things that you guys need to be aware of in working with people that are addicted, with children. So what do we do? Because basically what's happening is early on our brains are getting wired like this canyon right here, like with all this water. So if you're going to drop some water and hopefully it makes a new pathway, a new way to think about things, no, the tendency is all of this information, for when things go bad, the water runs down the middle of it because that's the most efficient way of getting things there. So when you're trying to make new connections, trying to work with people, that's what it's like, trying to make new connections in their brain. It's like there needs to be like these little paths in the Grand Canyon. What's were those paths in there? Repetitive walking. Repeat. It takes repetition. It takes doing things over and over with people until they learn new ways. And even then, those old ways are still set in the brain. I can't impress upon you enough. I gave this information to a group that included our district attorney here in Garfield County. And he's still, to this day, I saw him this week, he's like, man, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget, because it's threatening, because it's like, well, if that's happening in childhood, how can you hold somebody totally accountable when they're an adult? And that's what I want us to think about. I want us to wrestle with that. You need to think about that. Because if we continue just to place blame and don't look for fixes, it's not going to get any better. Our brain develops until we're at least 25 years old. And so we need to think about some things that we can do to make a difference. And so this lady named Bernard, or this researcher named Bernard in 1995 found 4 attributes of resilience in kids that have been through bad things, been through traumas, but they succeeded. So again, it's not a death sentence. It doesn't happen to everybody, but the risk is there. And for the folks that, if you're working in the field, this is what you're going to encounter. One of the things, let me work on, let's see here. Liz, are you out there?
Yeah.
Liz, could you read social competence for us, please?
Yes, the ability to elicit positive responses from others, thus establishing positive relationships with both adults and peers.
Okay, so being socially competent, being able to navigate social situations, that's predictive of resilience. What else do we have, Chelsea?
Problem-solving skill. Oh. Yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
Problem-solving skills, planning that facilitates seeing oneself in control, and resourcefulness, and seeking help from others.
Okay, yeah, being able to solve problems on your own, that resourcefulness. There's a video here, I don't have time, but it's at News OK, talks about a girl that's in foster care. Our rate of people that age out of child welfare custody that graduate college, anybody want to take a guess? I know one person that, what percentage of people that age out of state custody graduate college? 2%. 1 out of 50. 1 out of 50 people, if they age out of child welfare custody, graduates college in Oklahoma. We're not doing a very good job of taking care of our kids as a state. Kelsey, how about autonomy? Can you take us through autonomy, please?
A sense of one's own identity and ability to act independently and exert some control over one's environment.
Some self-efficacy. I'm effective in determining my own destiny. Absolutely. And then let's see here. Erica, could you take us through the last one?
A sense of purpose in future goals, educational aspirations, persistence, hopefulness, and a sense of a bright future.
If you pull up this link, this young lady is very hopeful, very optimistic. They talked to her. She's graduating college, kind of broke through. Very hopeful, very future oriented. Not stuck in the past. Even the interviewer talked to her about not being stuck in the past. There's also a short list of things that we can do to build resilience. How do you build resilience in kids that have been through some very difficult things? And the one thing I can tell you, the kids that make it, this is my own testimony, if they just have one caring, consistent, compassionate adult that's there, kids tend to make it. Kids are very resilient, can be through just the worst things. If you can think back in your own lives and think of one person that was there or the many people that were there that made a difference for you, that's what it takes. That's what it takes for people to succeed. If you have just one person that's consistent, one person that's there, one person that you can depend on, that's what helps people build that resilience to overcome those brain, architectural changes that we talked about. Effective parents and caregivers is number one. Let's see here. Cassie, what's number 2?
Connections to other competent and caring adults.
That could include teachers, include counselors, include mentors, people out there, in their youth group, aunts, uncles, even grandparents. Number 3, Justin.
Pro-social, competent peers and friends.
Yeah, but get them, don't let them run with the wrong crowd. Get them in with a good crowd. If you can get them involved in if you can get them involved in extracurricular activity like youth group or any type of athletics that they like, get them into a pro-social, good group of friends. And 4, take us through that if you don't mind, Adam.
Problem-solving skills.
Yeah, basically that's where counseling comes in. That's where education comes in. Rachel, what's number 5?
Self-regulation skills.
This is counseling. This is teaching them to control their impulses, the deep breathing, the regulation. Think about it before you act. And counseling comes right in on number 6. Whitney, what's number 6?
positive beliefs about the self.
All right, self-esteem. Having them, develop self-esteem. Christina, what's 7?
Beliefs that life has meaning.
All right, yeah, that future orientation. This life means something. Nikki, what's 8?
Spirituality, faith, and religious affiliation.
So, yeah, getting them hooked up in other things bigger than them. Socioeconomic advantages is way down on the list. It doesn't mean just give everybody money. It helps to have a little bit of advantage. Effective teachers and schools, and a safe and effective community. What they've done is they've looked at, and this comes from a study of genetics. We talked about our genes changing if somebody takes meth. They've done a study of epigenetics and how these things impact the genes that we pass on to our next generation. They did this study in rats, and there's a study that in the rats, if the rats are exposed to a bunch of threat and constant not enough food, that their brains start to change in much the same way that we talked about for humans. And so what they did is they looked at, okay, let's not let them be next to their dad then. So their dad lived through all this bad stuff, and then the dad had offspring. What they found is even if the rats weren't next to their dad that lived through all that bad stuff, the next generations of rats had bad behaviors, hypervigilant behaviors, like they had lived through it themselves. And so what they're like, wow, this is horrible. And so they're like, so we're passing this along generationally, possibly even through humans. So what they found though was that if you created this super supportive environment that really nurtured the rats were around other healthy rats, that they got all their needs met, that they were in a super interactive environment, had an extra wheel to run on, extra engaging, that it flipped the genetic code back, that they then were able to be healthy. And so that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, that if we're going to make a difference, it's going to take more than you or I or anybody by ourselves can do. It literally is going to take us acting in common. And that's not something our state's very good at. Our state is good at cutting away from programs that are designed to help people. And that's what research says, that's the last thing that needs to happen when it comes to this sort of thing. The younger that we can make a good impact, a better impact, the early childhood learning programs, those sort of things, getting the kids away from the traumatic experiences as early as possible, changing that environment is what makes the difference. So, I left you with a lot of information. Thank you. I appreciate your attention. Next week, we're going to get into motivational interviewing. Please, if you have this book, crack it open a little bit. Take a look at the stages of change. Familiarize yourself with them. We're going to get into technique next week. See you guys.